Hey, welcome to tutorial 2 of your Web Development for Beginners course. This tutorial is all about HTML, the standard markup language used to create web pages. Don't forget, if you are watching on YouTube, you can find a link to the full course in the description. So, today we'll cover everything you need to know about HTML and show you how it can be used to create the basic structure of a web page. You'll then apply what you have learned to your own portfolio project. We'll show you how you can code the basic outline of your website using HTML. By the end of this tutorial, you'll be familiar with one of the most important web development technologies and you'll have the structure of your website in place. Let's begin. So, what is HTML? HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Hypertext is text that can take you to different places. When you're on the web, you're on Wikipedia, you're searching through something and then you find another thing, you click it and you reach a new page, perhaps a new Wikipedia page. That's hypertext. Markup is just a way of structuring data in a way that the browser can understand and still easy for you to write. And language, the hypertext markup language, the language part is basically like any other language that we use as humans. In a sense, when a web developer learns a new language, they are actually learning how to communicate with the browser. HTML is one of the languages that the browser understands, and in this tutorial, we are going to learn how to speak that language. Let's start with the understanding of what an HTML element is. HTML elements are just special tags, special names that some components are given so that the browser understands that that component has a special meaning. So for example, I can write h1. h1 or heading 1 is an HTML element. We used this in the last tutorial. It made the text bold or bigger in size because that's a heading. To create an HTML element from the name of the tag, you basically have to surround it with angled braces. So you have the h1, now you add an opening angle brace and the closing angle brace, and now this is an HTML element. Not just yet, because an HTML element has an opening brace and also closing brace. This right here forms the opening brace. Now let's write the closing brace. The closing brace is exactly the same as opening brace with a special syntax that after the opening angle brace, you write a / that tells the browser that this is where the h1 element is closing down. Inside of this element, you can actually write any data that you want, and the browser knows that this is a heading element and the data should be represented as a heading text. So you can write hello world. As before, you go back to the screen and you refresh and you get hello world in bold. Now what if you don't want the text to be bold? You can use another HTML element. You can use paragraph. So paragraph or P is a tag that you can use to write paragraphs of text. For example, I can write, this is one line of the paragraph. Close it, and then maybe I can just copy it and then paste it again. And then I can do, this is line 2. So now we have 2 paragraph elements. Okay, so going back to the Chrome browser, and now we refresh the page and you see our headline and then the 2 paragraphs that we created. How did the browser know that the heading should be bolded and bigger in size, but the paragraph normal in size? That's with the help of the HTML tags and the default styles that the browser gives us. So that's how an HTML element looks. There is something else to an HTML element than just this. For example, an HTML element actually has something called an attribute. So an attribute is a special property that you give to the HTML element that modifies its behavior. So let's take an example and see what I mean by that. Let's take the third HTML element that we are going to look at. It's called a text area. So as the name suggests, it creates a text area in the page. So let's try that. We say text area and we close it. So as you can see, Sublime automatically closes the tag for me. So that's something nice that you get with Sublime that you wouldn't get from a normal plain text editor. So I save this page, I go back to my the browser and I refresh. And you see here, I get a text area and I can actually type stuff in. This is really interesting because you just write one little tag and you actually get like a very complicated text area that just works. But as you can see, it's like small in size. What if you want to make it slightly bigger? Let's try doing that with the help of HTML attributes. An attribute, unlike HTML elements, like the data inside of the HTML elements, takes its value inside of the tag itself. What I mean by that is, instead of writing, say, row here, say I want 50 rows or 40 rows. Instead of writing it here, I would actually write it inside of the tag. So rows 40. And then I save it, I go back and I refresh. You see the size of the tag has become like huge, half of the page. That's because the browser was able to read this value, read that I want rows and I want 40 of them inside of the text area. And then the browser gave me an input field with 40 rows inside of it. That's how attributes work. Now, text area is not the only element with that has attributes. As we go along, we encounter images, and how to add images to your page. We'll encounter more HTML elements like the image, which has attributes. So the third thing that you need to know about HTML elements is that HTML elements can be nested. What that means is you can add HTML elements within HTML elements. Let's look at another HTML element. That's the list element. So suppose you want a list of stuff. How do you create that? You create that with an unordered list element, which is UL. So you say UL, you close it, you close it. Now, HTML does not care if you write the same code on one line or multiple lines, it would still show the same. But it is a lot nicer to see things spread out as opposed to everything on the same line. So instead of having all of this close to each other, I can just write it this way and then it looks a lot nicer. Okay, so back to unordered list, UL. I can create another HTML element inside of this, LI, which stands for list item. And I can say list item 1 and then close the tag, and then I duplicate a couple of times, copy it and paste it, and then list item 2, list item 3, and I save it and I go back and refresh this page, and you can see here we have a new list created on the page with special format. You see this bullet point. We didn't write that bullet point inside of the list item. It actually came in automatically because HTML, the browser, saw that we wanted an unordered list, and it automatically gave us that bullet point, which is typical of lists. Now, what if you want an ordered list? You want something like numbers there, 1, 2, 3, or however much your elements are. You can just change the UL to OL, which, if you can guess, is instead of unordered list, it's ordered list now. So you make it OL at both the places, you go back, keep an eye on this and refresh, and there you have it. You have 1, 2, 3. And that's the magic of HTML. Like with minimal code and minimal understanding, you can get like super complicated stuff right away. So that's it for the basics of HTML. In the next section, we'll be looking at a couple of more HTML elements that we'll be needing to complete our portfolio project. Now let's look at some of the other HTML elements that we'll be needing and using in this project of ours, the portfolio project. So you can actually just go ahead and delete whatever is on your screen just to make it a little cleaner, but you don't need to. You can just keep typing. Okay, so the next element that we are going to look at is one of my favorite elements. It's the anchor tag. And that's the element that actually gives the hypertext in hypertext markup language its name. So let's create one, anchor tag, or A, the A tag. Let's create the braces. And we write something like, click here to find cat memes, or something like that. And now this element needs an attribute. We studied attribute last time. So we need an attribute called href, which is the reference where the link is supposed to take you. So I write href, and then I say https:// that is how URLs are, and then you write google.com. We are not doing any real memes, we are just pointing the page to google.com. So hopefully this works. We save this page, we go back and we refresh, and there you have it. You see a link that's blue in color because that's how you know it is a link. You have blue color font and then you have an underline under it. And then you click it and boom, it takes you to google.com. Isn't that magical? Let's look at something called as divs and spans. So I'll write it down because it's a little hard to understand what these are. So we have divs, and we have spans. So the way I understood about these elements is that you have to think about the web as a page with boxes in it. Everything is in a box. The image is in a box, the button is in a box, the form is in a box, and these boxes are nested together. That's how we nest HTML elements. These are just nested boxes. Our job as web developers is to position these boxes such that they look all right on all screen sizes. That's one of the roles that we have. That's responsive website development. We create a website once, but it works on mobile, it works on tablets, it works on PCs and whatnot. One way of grouping elements together, we have already seen, is when the HTML element itself comes with some context. So you have an unordered list. Now an unordered list does not make a lot of sense without the list items. So it is easy to remember that, okay, an unordered list would already have like a couple of one or more list items in it. That's nesting. But sometimes the relation is not that clear. So for example, you are writing an address of someone, address of a person. Let's try to actually write that down. So you write something like John Doe. And then you write 125, 123, Holzmarktstraße. And then you write 10179, Berlin. So this is an address of a person. Now you, as a human, when you look at something like this, just a couple of lines of text, you can immediately tell this is an address. You don't need like additional information about it. This looks like an address. A computer does not understand things that clearly. They are like little babies that have to be told every single thing. How do you nest this thing together such that it makes sense for the computer? First of all, everything should be like in its own HTML element. So let's give it a paragraph each, because yeah, it kind of makes sense. Because it's supposed to come up on a separate line. All of these lines need to look distinct. So let's just give it paragraph and see how it looks. Go back to the page, refresh, and you see they are grouped together. But for the browser, these are still three different tags that have no relationship to each other. What we do here is we can actually group them together with something called as a div. A div is just a meaningless block that gets its meaning from the content within it. It groups content together. So now you just make the spacing all right, and now boom, you go back, you refresh, and nothing changes because we didn't style the div or we didn't do anything with it. We just told the browser that this is how the content is structured. All of these three paragraph tags are part of the same general data that we are trying to convey. So remember, HTML is all about data and structuring of data. It's not about how things look. Okay, so that's divs. Spans are the exact same as divs, but spans only work for inline stuff. So for example, if I have say first name and last name, if I have to write the first name and last name, but I want to group them together somehow on the same line. If you do it with div, so for example, if I write div and I write John, and then I write on a separate line div Doe, and you save it, you refresh it, you see this looks weird because I want the John Doe to be on the same line. It's one name. So what you can do here in a situation where you want to have separate divs, but you still want the data to be on the same line, you can use span element. So you see span, just make everything a span, and a span. Save it, go back, and there you have it. The elements come back on the same level. But for the browser, there are still two distinct pieces of data that you can have different properties on, have different styles on, and things like that. So that's how you use divs and span. You group things together that do not have any other grouping predefined for them in HTML. The last thing that we are going to talk about that are super important actually are form elements. We have already looked at one form element. It was called the text area, if you remember. So we wrote text area, and if we got like a small place where you could enter text, we gave it rows 40, and then you got like a long text area element that had like 40 rows in it. That is a form element. There are a lot of other form elements. You must have already for sure used the button element. Button, as you can tell, is like something you click on. So for example, let me make a button element here. Button, I just say button, and I say this is a button, and I close it, close it, and then I go back and I refresh, and I get a button here. So you see, you just tell HTML what you want. In this case, it was a button, and you write it, you write some text within it, and there you have it, a button. There is select. You must have used this when you were selecting what country are you from or what state are you from. So you have select element, and then you have option, and say, let's say Germany, and then let's say France, and you save it. You go back to the page, refresh, and you see you have a drop down here where you can select if you want Germany or France. Isn't that cool? That's just literally 4 lines of HTML code. The basic thing that you need to remember here is that forms accept data. When you want to create a page that takes something from the visitors, you must have seen contact forms. That is when you want to get the feedback of your visitors. You create a form. You want to get the details of results of a survey. You create a form, survey form. So whenever you think about, okay, I need some data coming in from the user, that's it. That's where form elements shine. The one that makes most people happy is an image tag. The tag's name is img, short for image. So you say img and you close it. Now, unlike a normal HTML tag, which would be closed like this, if the tag itself has no data of its own, so for example, here the image tag does not have anything inside of it. I'll tell you how you get the image later, but the image tag does not have anything inside of the tag itself. So you can close it in the element itself by adding a / at the end. So this is an image tag. Let's go back and refresh. We get nothing because we haven't told it where to get the data from. So let's fix that. src. src stands for source, which is the source that we want to get the image from, the actual URL, the address of the image itself. So we can get this multiple ways, but for now I can just Google for something. Let's see. Cat placeholder images. Search that, and we get some URL, and then we get this link here. Let's copy that. So if you actually copy this link and then paste it in your browser, you'd see you get a random cat image. That's cool. But we want it to be in our HTML. So let's go back to our page, and in the image src section, let's just paste that image URL of the cat picture. Save it, go back to the page, just close this, go back to the page and refresh. And there you have it. You have the image pop up on the page that you are creating, you are writing code for. So you created your first image tag, so to speak. Okay, I think that's about it for what we'll need for the portfolio project. If we need anything else, we can always just learn about it when the time comes. But for now, I think that's good. In the next section, we'll be looking into creating the structure of the portfolio project that we'll be working on for the rest of the course. Finally, it is now time that we actually start coding the project that we have been talking about. This is the project that at the end of the course, you can proudly say that this is your first website and the first proper website that you can actually put online. So, okay, for this project, I have come up with this theme that is of a portfolio page. It is your portfolio page. So basically, it is who you are, what you like, some of your portfolio projects, like some of the projects that you'd work on in the future as images that people can click and reach. And then a typical footer section, like the bottom section of the website, which would be your links to your social profile, Facebook maybe, and then on the side you have a contacts form. Let's start with a blank canvas for the portfolio project. So now on the screen, you have some HTML that we have not looked into yet, but this is what every HTML page needs to have. There's nothing to learn here. Any HTML page that you create needs to have these sections. The head section is where things that are sort of metadata, details about the page itself, but not things that can be shown on the page go. So here you write something like title of the page. So this is my portfolio. And in the body is where you actually write content that that gets displayed on the page itself. So you first save this, you go back and you refresh, and you see here, you have the title of the page, my portfolio. So it is working. Okay, so our page is going to have 4 sections that I just described: the introduction section, the details about you, what you like, that section. And there's a portfolio section, and then there is a footer section. So we'll just go ahead and create these sections using the same elements that we have already looked into in the previous section. So first is div. Remember why we used div. We group content together that cannot be organically, naturally grouped using some HTML element. So this is my introduction section, which consists of my image or any image. So it is an image tag. Let's just create this. We can add some placeholder data here. Let's just create an h1 where I'll write my name. So this could be John Doe for now. Then I'll have an h3. So like we studied, h1, h2, h3, it's like the most important heading to the least important heading, all until h6. So we're using h3, and here I'll write something like web developer at CareerFoundry. So that's just like a one-line description, just like on LinkedIn. And the last one would be, I want to feature, I always like featuring some quote. So here I would like to feature like some quote that I want to share with people who visit my web portfolio. So this would be inside of curly braces. Oh, curly braces are just for aesthetic purposes. So I'll write pause and ponder. This is from a favorite YouTuber of mine. Okay, so let's go back and see what we have here. So we have the name, we have the description or the title in h3, and then we have the quote, but we do not have the image here. That is because the src here is blank. So there is no source, it doesn't have an image. Let's just search for some placeholder image for now. We can actually add like a proper image later on when we are done with the styling and stuff. So let's see. Placeholder image, okay. And we have this. Let's try this here. Let's just first copy this, paste this here and see how it looks. 150. Okay, so 150 by 150, that's the size of the image in pixels. Okay, so I copy this, I go back, I paste it here, and if I go back to my page, just close these tabs. There you have it. So we have the introduction section here ready with the data. You do not have to care about how ugly this looks because this does look ugly, but you have to remember that all of that is for CSS to fix. HTML is all about the content. So just like that, we have a couple of more sections, the about section, then you have the portfolio section, and then the links and contact section. So let's type it out. Okay, so we have the introduction section here for your portfolio page. It is basically two lists. We go back to our page now and we refresh, and there you have it. You have the two sections here. We'd ideally want to make them look a little nicer on the end result, but for now, this is how the data looks, and it's perfect. This is what we wanted. The next section is the portfolio section, which is basically a title and then 4 images, which would be our portfolio projects. So that was quick. Basically, the portfolio section is just an H3 heading 3 that says my projects, and then you have 4 images. I've just copied the image URL from the top that we used for our photo, but instead of 150 at the end, I made it 300 because that's the 300 by 300 picture that I want, slightly bigger. So now if we go back to the screen and we see, this image would be slightly bigger and it would just be in one row, but that's okay for now. So let's try if it works properly. Yeah, so as you can see, this was 150 by 150, this is 300 by 300. This is all coming from this nice website that I'm using. Cool, the next section and the final section is the bottom links, and which contains the form element and stuff. So let's type that out. So that was a lot of typing, but as you can see, I have created two sections here. This is one, which is the form, and the other one is links. The links one is pretty straightforward. You have the H3, and then you have the unordered list that we saw earlier, and then you have all these list items nested inside. And inside of the list items, you have an anchor link. So this is also a good example of how the nesting works, because we want each of the list items to be an anchor link in itself. With the form, we have a couple of new elements here. We have the form element, which tells the browser that anything inside of it is going to be part of the form that needs to be sent when the user submits the form. So what needs to be submitted? Let's see. You have the label. Label element is just placing a label next to the input element. So you have the email, this is the label, and then you have this input, which is an input element. This is exactly the same as a text area element, just that this is just one line. So imagine a text area element with a row count of 1. And so this is the email, and then you have the message section, which is the text area that we have already seen. And then we have a special input field here with the type submit, which actually does not render an input field, but a button, which submits the form when that button is clicked. So that's a lot to take in, but I'd suggest just type this as in and just give it some time. And when we reach JavaScript and actually make use of these form fields, I'm sure you'll pick them up as we actually work with the validations and writing JavaScript code around these inputs. For now, just know that there are many form fields, and the 3 that we have used here, input, text area, and then input with type submit, are just a couple of them. So having typed this, save everything, go back to the Chrome browser and refresh. Voila. So we have this form section at the bottom of the page. As you can see, we wanted a list of anchor links that take the user to our social pages. So you have GitHub, Twitter, LinkedIn. Currently, there is no username attached to the URL, so it wouldn't take you anywhere. I mean, if you click on it, it would be like a 404, a page file not found page. But yeah, so you make sure you add your own social profiles there instead of my placeholder links. And the form elements, the form section is made up of 2 elements, the input, email input, and the message input. And then the submit button, which was here. As you can see, the value here, which is send message, gets printed on the top of the button. That just about concludes tutorial 2. Let's recap what we studied. We learned about the various kinds of HTML elements. We created our first web page and added the structure and information that we'll work with throughout this course. In fact, what you did today is what you'll generally do at the beginning of any web project. You'll structure your data and put it into the right HTML elements. Now that this is done, we can focus on the style and functionality. In other words, now we can add more color, formatting, and positioning to our HTML document. In the next tutorial, we'll take a first look into the world of CSS, the language of styles on the internet. See you there!